stress?
Baby, let's talk about you and me. Let's talk about all the good things and the bad things that may be. Let's talk about.
Let's talk about stress. My name is Stephanie Hajar. Welcome to the Pursuing Excellence podcast. Today, I want to talk a little bit about the one emotion or state that I hear people talking about most often. You know, when you ask people, how are you? A lot of times people just say good. But the other thing that I hear most frequently is, I'm stressed, or I feel stressed, or I've been so stressed. So forgive me if I say the word stress 4,000 times in the next few minutes, but I think it's important that we talk about it. When we talk about stress, do we even really know what we're talking about? I think a lot of times we use stress as sort of an umbrella word for overwhelm, anxiety, all kinds of different things. But let's talk about what it actually is and then what we can do about it in order to be able to move through stressful times and situations a lot easier. So when it comes to stress, it's important that we understand the two different kinds of stress. The first type of stress is called eustress or hormesis. We often hear about eustress or hormesis in the realm of biohacking or wellness. However, this type of stress is a type of stress that we can experience at many different times using different tools, and sometimes not even using a particular tool. It's just a mindset. And what this form of stress is the kind that improves performance and allows us to grow. Now, there's another kind of stress, and this stress is called distress. It's the kind that feels like it's outside of our coping abilities, that tends to make us feel down or overwhelmed, or just like we just can't get through this obstacle. It feels like it's too much, and it could decrease performance, especially if it goes on for an extended period of time. So let's define the word stress. Stress is essentially a response in the mind or the body to a limit being pushed or multiple limits being pushed. As you can see here, the word stress is exactly what I just said. Eustress or hormesis is the type that that has a positive impact and it improves performance. Distress is the kind that feels like it's outside of our coping abilities and it can decrease performance. Now, the kind that we typically think about is chronic distress. But I want to make sure that you know that not all stress is chronic and not all stress is distress. In fact, most of the time, the stress that we experience on a daily basis or a weekly basis is the kind that actually improves performance and can have a positive impact. So now that we've defined stress and we've noted the two different kinds, let's talk about the next thing, which is what even causes stress. Now, typically when we're thinking about stress in the context of telling people that we feel stressed, it's usually mental stress. And one of the things that tends to cause us stress the most often is the things you see on this screen. Social media, work tasks, maybe it's all the things you have to do for your personal life and your work life and you are having a hard time balancing. Maybe it's the things you see on the news. Usually it is. So I want you to write down or maybe think about right now as you're watching this, what are your top 3 stressors? Is it when that one person in my household says that one thing to me or just even says anything to me? Is it when I see specific people on the news or I hear certain things on the news? Is it when my boss comes in and asks me if I finished that project and I haven't yet? Is it when I'm doom scrolling or when I'm just looking for something great on social media and all of a sudden I see all these things that I really didn't want to see in the first place? What are the stressors or the cues for your stress response to begin? Maybe it's just knowing that you have to drive in traffic. Maybe it's just realizing that you have a long laundry list of things to do and it feels like it's outside of your coping abilities. It feels like you have a limit that's being pushed. Maybe it's a time limit. Maybe it's a Maybe it's a capacity limit. Maybe you're just exhausted and you feel like your limit is being pushed, your energy limit is being pushed. What is the limit that's being pushed? And what are the cues for your stress response to begin? Now, I think it's really important that we note the difference between stress and anxiety. And the reason why I want to note the difference between these two things is because sometimes when we feel stressed or we think that we're stressed, we actually are feeling anxious. And sometimes when we're feeling anxious, we actually are feeling stressed. And most of us don't quite know what the difference is between stress and anxiety. So let me just go ahead and define that for you. So as you now know, stress is a response in the mind or body, or both, to limits being pushed. And stress can be about something right now in the present moment. Okay, now anxiety, on the other hand, solely lives in the future. Anxiety is typically about something in the future, whether the future is 5 seconds from now, 5 minutes from now, 5 days, 5 months, 5 years. It's always in the future. So we're usually not anxious about the current moment. We're anxious about what might happen 5 seconds after this moment or 2 seconds after this moment. Anxiety is an overwhelming emotion that tends to be linked to fear or worry. And again, it's not about the present moment, it's about something in the future. So it's a feeling of fear, worry, or unease about something to come. It's kind of a feeling that something should be happening right now that clearly isn't. So maybe the feeling is, I should feel at ease right now, but I'm not. Maybe the feeling is, I want to know what the outcome is of this particular situation, but I don't. Maybe you're about to graduate college and you're thinking to yourself, I have so much anxiety, and maybe you think it's stress, but maybe it really is anxiety. You go, I have so much anxiety about getting a job after college. I have so much anxiety about what job I might get. It's that unknown and that fear of something in the future. The fear and or the anxiety about that job is not just which job are you going to get and how amazing is it going to be. The thought process is typically about, am I even going to get a job? And if I do get a job, is it going to be horrible? So just a quick thing to note, that anxiety is very different from stress. And it's all about a fear or worry that lives in the future, whereas stress is something that lives in the current moment. It could live in the future, but it's mostly right now. So stress is sort of that feeling that maybe the set of circumstances that I'm currently in maybe shouldn't be happening, right? So if you think about the you stress, the hormesis stress, when you're in the gym and you're lifting a weight that maybe is pretty easy to lift the first few reps, and then you get to the last few, maybe 7, 8, 9, 10, and it becomes really difficult, and maybe that last one is you're about to fail. It's so hard. That stress, again, is a limit that's being pushed, and it feels like this shouldn't be happening, and yet when you do it, and even if you don't get the full rep up, you're allowing your body to break itself down so that it can build itself up. Quite literally, your muscle will break down so that it can build itself back up. And that's what happens mentally as well when we experience some type of external stressor, maybe even an internal stressor. When we experience stress mentally and emotionally, we can remind ourselves that this might be an opportunity for us to grow. This might be an opportunity for me to experience something, some limit that I feel like is being pushed. And if I allow myself to sort of lean into that and experience what that feels like to reach my capacity, then maybe after this situation or set of circumstances, my capacity will grow, and so will my ability to handle that stress. So if your level of stress is, if you're at your limit, and it's because you are at work and you've just got so many things to do and it's new maybe, or you're just working on a new project, or maybe it's at home with certain people. If you feel like you've reached your limit, remind yourself that this is maybe allowing you to increase your limit, to increase that ceiling so that you have a greater capacity to handle stress and to manage stress. Now, speaking of managing stress, let's talk about a couple ways in which we can do that. Here are 3 steps to manage your stress. Number 1, know what your stressors are. What are those things that cue my stress response? What are those things that get me worked up, that make me feel like I'm reaching my limit or my capacity? What are those things? Number 2, know what to take charge of and how. When it comes to stress, we often make ourselves accidentally feel even more stress or overwhelm or anxiety because we try to take control of everything. And when you try to take control of everything, you essentially gain control of nothing, and then it feels like you're even more out of control. And usually we try to control the external things, but it's an internal game. So what can you actually take charge of? And notice how I didn't say control, but taking charge of something and influencing something is very different from control. So know what you can take charge of, okay? And then how? How do you take charge of this thing? So what can I actually do when it comes to my long list of to-dos at work? I can knock one at a time out. I can organize them into different priorities. I can delegate if necessary. What can you actually do? And then how do you do it? Okay, well, I sit down and I take 5 minutes or 10 minutes and I divvy up all the tasks and I rearrange them in my high, medium, and low priority list, whatever it is. So know what to take charge of and know how to take charge of it. And step number 3 sounds pretty simple. It's just go for it. Go for it. A lot of times when we're in a state of stress, we feel paralyzed because we feel like we're reaching our limit, or maybe we've hit our limit and it's being pushed and we feel like, oh my gosh, I just can't do anymore. But is that true? Can you do a little bit more? Can you do something differently? Maybe that's the question. The better question is, can you do something differently? So when it comes to managing our stress, it's vital that we at least take one step forward, because feeling frozen and getting stuck in that fight, flight, or freeze mode of our nervous system and our mind really doesn't do much good for us, because then it just prolongs the stress or it increases the anxiety on top of the stress. So know your stressors, know what to take charge of and how to take charge of it. Step 3, do it. One step at a time. We try to think that we can just skip 5 steps, but we really can't. If you go one at a time, it'll show you how much greater of a capacity you have, and it'll allow you to turn that distress into hormesis or eustress. And aside from the 3 steps that I showed you in this video on how to manage your stress, I also created another exercise shown in another video that's called PEACE or PEACE. And it's an exercise that can help you to turn your distress into eustress. So go ahead and check out that video. I'll link it somewhere over here for your viewing pleasure. If you like this video and you learned something, maybe you learned the difference between stress and anxiety, or maybe you just learned a tool to help you manage your stress, let me know. Put it in the comment section, share it with a friend, give it a thumbs up if you liked it, and please tune in to the next episode of the Pursuing Excellence podcast. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you next week.